Can you imagine a world where kindness is at the heart of all of us? That's a world worth leaving to our children. Welcome to Love, Laughter and Kindness, where kindness is more than an idea, it's a movement. Brought to you by Zorzle, with inspiring guests as we laugh, reflect and imagine a kinder future together. Well, today I have two wonderful guests with me. I have Ben-Moshe and I have Sally Pymer. And it's such a delight to have you both here. And Ros, you've already commented on my handiwork with the background. It took me ages to build that. I didn't have a level. So, I hope it's level enough for you. What about you, Sally? Is my background okay?
Yeah, I did notice that there was a bit crooked. I went, oh, that is quite clever. I'm very impressed with that.
And you've got, how long did it take you to draw the circle on your wall behind?
Look, ages. I do my background. It was like, I put it on there, then I rubbed it off, and I did it again, I rubbed it off, and
You've got to get it right, haven't you?
imperfect.
You've really got to get it right. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really delighted to have you both with me this morning, and thank you for making time. So, Sally, you're living on a farm regionally in Victoria?
I am, yes. So I live on a farm about 10 kilometres out of Horsham, in Victoria. So it's beautiful.
That's great. And Ros, you don't live on a farm?
I don't.
Now, Ros is it tells me that your books, or at least one of your books, is a best-selling book, Laughing at Cancer.
Yeah, The Laughter Effect's been published in 9 languages, so that's probably more of it's got, more traction than the Laughing at Cancer. But Laughing at Cancer's just had a new reprint as well, modified. So they're plodding along.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, if you've had the laughter effect in 9 languages, that tells me that people in all kinds of different countries laugh.
That's true. Or need to.
And Sally, on your webpage is Empowered with Sally. It says, speaker rebuilding trust, belonging and connection, one smile at a time, which I love. It's a beautiful phrase.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great. And I think that's it. And we'll probably get into it later. But just, that power of that smile to build trust and connection. It's one of those simple things that can have, so many benefits. So that's what I aim to do. Well, to encourage others to do that. Yes.
It's so important, isn't it? And it's really wonderful. It makes such a difference. A smile. In my first interview in this podcast was with Hugh Mackay, and you might have seen it, where he told the story of the young man who attempted suicide in Canberra. And recovering in hospital, he was reported as saying, if only someone had smiled at me, I wouldn't have jumped, which shows how isolated and lonely he felt. So, so it's a great slogan to have. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to start. I'm going to do something slightly different today. And what I'm going to do is give you a line first to think about. So the first one is, every superhero wears a disguise. Some just look like ordinary neighbours. And I've got 2 lovely ordinary neighbours with me this morning. They're both superheroes. And superheroes can, with my disability work, I call my clients supers, because I think they all have such wonderful skills. And Sally, I know you had a brother with a disability, so you might understand that as well.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I had a brother with severe disabilities who pretty much required 24/7 care and couldn't do much. But there's so many strengths that everybody's got. So it's looking for those positives and the amazing strengths you have, and focus on those things rather than what you can't do. Focus on what you can do rather than what you can't do. So
I saw someone who on Facebook, I think it was LinkedIn, and she was from America, and she was talking about how she cried for I don't know how long when she was told that the baby in the womb had Down syndrome. And she has a photograph of her with her daughter in her car, and she says she has no regrets, and that her little me has changed her life so positive, so wonderfully, Of course, lots of people have all kinds of challenges which make things difficult. So I'm going to tell you a little story that I heard. It's very short, and then I'm going to ask you to give me your own thoughts on it. So there's an Irish comedian who died many years ago. His name was Hal Roach. And he told this story. He said the doctor's in his surgery and the receptionist comes rushing in and says, Doctor, your last patient has just dropped dead going out on the steps outside the front door. And the doctor says, quick, go out and get him, turn him around, make it look like he's coming in. Both of you have had life challenges that have been very, very major. And so I'm going to ask you, how have you turned around your lives? So maybe start with Roz and then go to Sally. I know you've written about how you've turned yours around, Roz, but
Yes, thank you. I do like that little Irish story. Yeah, around 15 years ago, out of the blue, I was diagnosed with bowel cancer, and yeah, it's a rather a big diagnosis to receive, and there was a malignant polyp in my rectum, and I was told that there were some cells outside of that, so I opted to have a full bowel resection, and because the tumor was so low down in the rectum, they recommended that I have an ileostomy, so a bag you wear on the outside, which processes your shit, for lack of a better word, and all being well, it would be reversed. And thank God, after 4 months, that was the case. The cancer had not spread, thank God. But that was my first experience of, I had been a laughter yoga facilitator. I lectured in health promotion and public health. I shunned fast food. I, didn't drink, didn't smoke. It's like, where did it go? I was not overweight, and I'd been spending the last maybe 4 or 5 years preaching about how laughter is really great for you. And I'd gone into community health groups, I've gone into cancer support groups, and espoused all of the wonderful health benefits of laughter. But you get a diagnosis of cancer, it's nothing funny about that. And then part 2 of that is you have surgery in the abdominal region. You physically cannot laugh for several weeks. So here was I, almost like with this bit of a conundrum, this thing that I'd been born with, laughter was rudely taken out of my hands. But how did I get it back into me to enable my healing when I physically could not laugh for 4, 5, 6 weeks? And that was really the beginning of my journey into what I call, the laughter effect, how we can actually trigger the feeling of laughter even if we haven't laughed. So, that's through intentional smiling, that's through, gratitude, really pausing, into the things that we're grateful for, and not just, in a sort of a haphazard way. And also, during this time, which was the basis of my first book, I kept journals. And initially, whilst I, was writing for myself, I realized I was writing for an imagined audience, because I kept posing these questions. It's like, well, what would you do if you were faced with this? How would you reframe the language of cancer? How would you, introduce some positivity into your day? All of those sorts of questions that were coming to me. So for me, it was very much a situation where I was really presented with a huge mountain of a challenge, but through intentional positivity, smiling, laughter, positive reframing, I managed to somehow disperse this mountain into little mounds and sort of make it more of an empowering journey, as opposed to just falling victim to it, letting the experts just take over my body and my mind. So I really made a commitment to myself at the very beginning of this, the bowel cancer experience, was that I let the doctors take charge of the illness, but I took charge of my wellness. And for me, that really made all the difference in the world, both physically, spiritually, and emotionally.
well, that's wonderful. What a challenge. And isn't it strange how life gives you these curveballs? You're doing wonderful things with, the laughter therapy and so on, and, preaching a wonderful message, and then suddenly you get really hit, kind of like, we're going to test you out here.
Yeah. A very big gap between practicing and preaching, and that's been what the heavens above have wanted me to do. It's like, don't just do it for everyone else, practice it yourself.
Let me ask you, before I move to Sally, let me ask you, since your recovery, and how has the things that you had studied and taught other people and so on about laughter, how has it helped you?
That's a very big question, because on so many levels, and some of them I can measure and some of them I can't. So, as I say, there's that sort of the spiritual side, there's the physical side, there's so much to it. I think one of the biggest takeaways is that, not every day is good, but there is good in every day. And gratefully, I have many tools up my well-being sleeve that I can draw upon. So whether that's, just literally stopping and it's like, into the present, it's like, what am I grateful for now? Well, I had a, beautiful warm shower. I'm having this opportunity to have a, wonderful chat with you and meet Sally. I've got, a great nephew who's literally on his way from the other side of the world. I get to meet him. So, all of these, these are the sorts of things that really, make a difference to my day. And even, in the painful, in the darker moments, it's sort of taking responsibility for my time. Like, if I'm having a challenging day, will I turn on the news or will I, up the comedy? Will I call someone who I know is just going to like bring me down and, give me problems to think that I didn't even think I needed to think about? Or do I, call someone just for a lighthearted laugh? So I think it's really important that, every day we have to take responsibility for our thoughts and our actions, which is a bummer because it'd be great if we could outsource it. It's sensing into, and I'm sure Sally will address this, how things just like, going for a walk and smiling at the people who pass, by and then them smiling back at you, how much that sort of gives you a bit of a hit of dopamine and, makes you feel good, that oxytocin, that molecule of trust. So yeah, it's in the small everyday moments. It's not about the big things necessarily. And if we wait for those big things to sort of rewire our happiness, well, we'll be waiting a hell of a long time.
Mm, totally. Thanks so much, Ros. That was fantastic. Now, Sally, I know that you've had some huge challenges, and you may wish to talk about that. But so, how have you turned your life around?
Oh, look, do you want me to go back to my challenges? Or
As much as you want to say, okay?
yeah, no, that's fine. So, I said that, I had a brother with disabilities. So, so I guess I was born into a world where I knew that life wasn't perfect and everybody was a little bit different, but you focus on what you can do rather than what you can't do. So,
Yeah.
when I was younger, I had asthma, which a lot of kids do. And I was told when at about 12 I'd grown out of it. But I found myself at the age of 19 in hospital. I had a chest infection and the doctor said, look, no worries. Once you can blow a certain level on this barometer, we'll let you go home. So I'm blowing away and I'm blowing as hard as I can. But no matter how hard I tried, I could just not get to that level that they said. So then they informed me this was actually permanent. I had a permanent lung. My lung capacity was permanently lowered and I'd had no idea. So pretty much I was diagnosed with chronic lung disease at the age of 19. I'd never been a smoker, and similar to Roz, I'd always looked after my health. I'd been a swimmer. I'd, eaten healthily. I'd always exercised, been so proactive in my health. And I guess my proactivity in my health had probably been because my brother had, he'd been in hospital and I knew hospital wasn't a place I wanted to be. So actually being diagnosed with chronic lung disease at 19 was a huge challenge for me. And, then I was told I'd most likely have emphysema by the time I was 40. And at the age of 19, being told you're most likely to get emphysema by the time you're 40 was like, well, I thought 40 was old. I realized 40 is not old. But it was just this real, it really kind of hit me, but I also probably went into denial for a couple of years. But then I also decided, you know what, I can go, poor me, this is what's happened, and try to turn to medication and just back off. Or I can be so proactive and try to do the best I can to look after myself. So I continued with exercise, I continued with healthy eating and did all I could. And also, yeah, and then I actually became a triathlete and competed in marathons and ultra marathons and was quite successful in exercise I did. But the thing is, I focus on what I could do rather than what I couldn't do as well. So because of my lung obstruction, you get me to run 100 meters, I'm way at the back because everyone's sprinting, but I can run long and steady for a long time. So I guess it's that reframing too, like Roz has kind of said, you focus on what you can do. So that was, great to do that. But I guess like with chronic lung disease and probably like Roz with, bowel cancer, it's an invisible thing that you're dealing with. And I could walk down the street and have no idea what's going on in my background. And that's probably a bit of where the smile come in as well. You never know what someone's story is, what's going on in the background. So just smiling at someone can actually acknowledge that you see them. You don't need to know their story, but it's just probably that acknowledgement that, hey, look, I understand you've got a story and let's just connect and yeah, show some friendliness with that. And there's more challenges as well, David, like, from my chronic lung disease, I couldn't, obviously couldn't breathe properly. And it was discovered at the age of, well, it was discovered, at about the age of 40 that I had quite large tonsils. And so they thought that that might be affecting my breathing. So I had throat surgery and they also reshaped my throat. They removed my uvula, which is the dangly bit at the back of your throat. And removed my tonsils. And with that, when I woke up, I couldn't speak properly. So, and people couldn't quite understand what I was saying. And apparently, when I was 19, they didn't want to take my tonsils out because they said I was too old. So it seemed quite ironic that at the age of 40, I had my tonsils out. And and then I had to relearn how to speak because people couldn't understand me. And even now, I deal with the consequences of that surgery because having your nuclear removed also means I'm at greater risk of choking because it kind of blocks food, going down it blocks the food going into your lungs. So I have to be really careful when I eat. So I joke with my family that I'll probably be someone that dies choking, which is not funny, but it's a way of actually making it lighthearted about what's happened. As well. So so obviously now I can speak a lot better, but it's just been that extra challenge that was thrown at me with that. So and then I became anaphylactic to bees a couple of years later. But that's a sidestep. But I guess we never really know what people are going through. So it's really that reinforcement that everybody has a story we know nothing about, but a smile can be that great connected, but like Ross said, it releases dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, and can make you feel good. I've rambled a bit there, so
No, you haven't. No, that's been fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, again, that's a really powerful point that you talk about there, and different people do talk about that, of course. And that is you don't know what's going on in someone else's life. Someone else is walking along, they're either smiling or even sometimes we're very judgmental. We see someone and the person's looking grumpy or saying, what's wrong with you? Put a smile on your face. And you don't know what they've been through or they're facing at that time. So, that's where kindness and empathy comes in, doesn't it? I've got a wonderful saying for both of you. Laughter is kindness wearing running shoes.
that's great.
I like that. I like that. Let me ask you a question now. The whole thing here is, love, laughter, and kindness. And I added laughter to what I was doing because of meeting Roz some time ago, Sally. And so the question is, I have this naive view that kindness can turn things around, and so can laughter, and of course, so can love. And I included a story which was in the podcast I did with Hugh Mackay. and that was about a Jewish cantor in Nebraska who was so courageous because when he was threatened constantly from the Ku Klux Klan and the leader of the Ku Klux Klan, he simply responded with kindness and said, I don't hate you, you hate me, but I want to befriend you. And eventually takes the man into his house, and he and his wife nurse him till he dies, because he's actually dying of diabetes, and he'd lost legs and so on. So I look at the world naively and I think, if only our governments and our leaders could respond to their perceived enemies with kindness, how different the world would be. I'd love to know both your thoughts on this. Is this just being really silly and naive, or do you think that there is a real possibility that we could make our world a better place?
Look, my thoughts are, I always go to the why.
Mm,
Like, why is this behavior happening, and why is this behavior happening? And if you can keep going back to identify, the why, then it gives you the raw person, and you understand that, people being grumpy or, being unkind, there's a reason why that's happening. And it's not that they don't want to be unkind, it's just that there's something has built up to that stage of doing that. And I think the world's very reactive rather than proactive. I think we often react and look at the surface level, but don't actually go back to what's really going on.
yeah.
So I think if we dug a little bit deeper and asked some more of those questions about why things are happening, then I think we can come from a lot more of a kindness way and see things from people's point of view. Because I think if we understand people and what's going on, then it gives us greater connection and identification of, this is what's going on. We can be kind, we can understand your point of view, and we know what we're dealing with. But when we feel surface level, it's like we it's very easy to just look at what's right in front of us rather than looking at what's happening behind. But I definitely think we can be much kinder. But I also think it can become. It doesn't always have to come from the top down. It can happen from the bottom up as well. Like, I think everybody has the ability to make a difference, but with the smiling and the laughter and things like that as well. And I think often we just look for others to solve our problems, when really I think we can have the power to do it as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Sally.
Yeah.
Roz, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think it's what, Sally said. It's, this whole idea of top down versus bottom up. I think that if you sort of look at the political echelons and, the narcissistic, behaviors that tend to be out there, I don't think that's the right place to look. I think we need to look at, the everyday people, everyday interactions.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely, the ripple effect of kindness, of smiling, of laughter, that's how it spreads. In many regards, if you're sort of thinking about politics, it's sort of, they're in their, glass, whatever, is cages almost. So I think that's a way that we can actually lose hope that there is possibility. But when we shift it to just sort of, just person to person, we have so much power to influence. So yes, there's political influence, and obviously that has a huge influence on, all of us at some level, but there is that personal influence. And I think that that's where we really have a better chance of creating a kinder, more empathic, more humane world.
Yeah, and look, I agree with you there, and I also. But it is such a challenge, isn't it? Particularly if you do face, you mentioned the narcissistic personality type who loves to be in a position of power and so on.
And they don't value kindness. It's like,
No.
Sally, I think you mentioned, you said everybody wants to or can be kind. Sorry, I can't recall exactly what you said. I actually, as much as I would like to believe that, I actually think for some people it's just not part of their values. It's just like, what? That's like, it's cutthroat. Well, this is how I have to be. This is what I've got to do to achieve it. Kindness, what soft, mucky sort of concept is that? So yeah, that's just, anyway, my thinking that, yeah, we have to sort of, with everything, we have to sort of feel that we have some sort of control. It's with ourselves, but then, how can our little influence shape other people? And we're not going to change, the Trumps of the world, like forget it. But we can change someone else's perspective if we connect heart to heart, face to face. There's so much power in that.
There is the interview with Craig Foster. He was talking about that near the end of the podcast, where he was talking about getting to befriend people, who you might, if you don't know them, like he said, if you're a Muslim friend, do you have any Muslim friends? Do you have any, people from this culture or that culture or somewhere else? Do you have any people from Africa? And when you do befriend people, you discover that we are so alike in so many different ways. We might eat different foods, we might have different customs and cultures, but basically, we need and look for the same sort of things that are really so important to us. Now, again, coming back to both of you with your stories and the challenges of your health, your lives and so on, which every one of us have got in some way, but we don't all have your dramatic health stories. But this line, experience is something you don't get until just after you need it. Can I get you to tease that out a little bit from the experiences of the challenges of your lives? Obviously, it's happened, and then you can draw on it. How has that changed you?
Shall I jump in? Might jump in. That's okay. They say that God gives you what you can handle and you get what you need, not what you want. So I sometimes think that people with big stories, they can handle it. You either sink or you swim, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's interesting, when I share my story, it's like, or way back when it was sort of more active, the different responses, it's like, oh my God, that's terrible. Oh my, and it's like, every single bad thing that you could think of was like, brought out in that sort of interaction. Whereas for me, yes, it was a hugely challenging time. However, I wouldn't be the person that I am now if I hadn't had that. I wouldn't have been sort of, that grappling, with that sort of mortality, that grappling with this idea that, hey, one day I can laugh, one day I physically can't. What that does to me. And so it sort of helped me sort of develop my own life philosophy, my unique life philosophy, this idea, as I say, of the laughter effect. It's action-based positivity, it's joy, no matter what is going on. So yeah, in theory, gosh, of course I would have loved not to have gone through it, but then what would I be doing with my life?
Yeah.
Like, where it gave me such meaning and purpose and a commitment to not let my experience, go to waste as such, for it to be for the betterment of other people as well as myself. So there was much gratitude amidst all of the whys.
I've heard people say, Sally, I'd love to hear what you have thoughts on this, but I've heard people say, you go through bad times and you say, why me? Why me? And then, but there's another question. Why not me?
Yeah.
We live in a random world. Things just happen, unfortunately. Sally.
Yeah, and I was going to say, that why me is definitely something that, I have had come up a lot. But then I think the more challenges you face, the more you kind of don't go with it. You're like, oh yeah, it's another thing. Like, I can cope with it. I can deal with it. I've done hard things before. So I think, yeah, the more challenges you face, the more that you can deal with it. I was going to say, when I was first diagnosed with the chronic lung disease, I was in denial, and I was going to the doctor, and the doctor said, "How do you breathe?" And I said, "I can breathe just fine." But they wouldn't listen because I believe I was born with it and know no different. I felt like I wasn't believed. So in response, I just actually did not go to the specialist after that because I felt like I wasn't listened to.
Yeah.
And then, later on I'm doing athletics and I'm successful and I go to the doctor and I say I've got chronic lung disease and they say, no, you don't. You compete in events. So you don't have chronic lung disease, which reinforced that I'm not being listened to again. So I feel like my challenges have, and, talking with other people has reinforced that real conditioning in me to listen to people, to really listen to their perspective and where they're coming from. So, you think of those two different experiences. A doctor says, you can't breathe. Another doctor says, you can breathe. And my condition has not changed at all. It's just the fact of being listened to. So I think that's where, my real thing is to really listen to people. What is their story? What is their perspective? Because when you really listen, then people will open up and they'll actually tell you what's going on. And then you can get to the real core of what's going on. And even just that ability to chat and go, oh, that weight's off their shoulders. They feel better and able to find more joy in the world because they haven't got that aggro of, no one understands me, no one's listening. Like, it's just this real sense of calm and actually feeling seen and that they matter. And often, we talk about grumpy people and other people, and I think that smile and that kindness is really that opening to people feel comfortable to telling their story and to say what's going on and to actually show that they matter and that you are listening. So, yeah, so I think those experiences have really reinforced that real listening and acknowledging people's stories. And what you see on the surface is not always what's going on underneath. And you can make assumptions about what's going on, but you don't really know until you actually have that conversation and take the time to really listen and want to listen, I guess is the thing too.
That's that is so powerful. Working with people with disabilities, quite often, you'll have people who are not able to communicate terribly well, and it's really easy to make judgments about situations. Oh, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't do this, or this is how you should do things, or whatever it is. But if you hear and listen to someone, it can make such a difference. Now, for both of you, two quick sayings: smile at a stranger, you might accidentally improve their world. And the other one is one that I really love, which is from the Danish-American comedian, pianist Victor Borge, who said, the shortest distance between two people is often a smile.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's a bit of a pity that we don't have the old campfires, and they do that obviously at Rubicon, where your son
Yeah.
teaches, kids sitting around a campfire without their electronic equipment and, able to talk, look at the flames, but share, smell the smoke, all that sort of thing. So you're both very different people because of the experiences that you've been through. Ros, I know that you have done sessions in libraries, you've done work in the universities, in businesses and all kinds of things like that. Sally, you're aiming to do similar things yourself with your business and your website, which has the beautiful name of Empowered with Sally, which I really love. So I'm wondering if either of you have got a story about a person that you feel was really impacted, other than yourself, by laughter, Ros, in a time of their life when it was really needed. And Sally, do you have I'm putting you both on the spot. Sally, do you have a story about smiling or kindness that has impacted somebody that you know? So who wants to go first?
I can go if you like.
Yeah, we can go for it, Sally.
Yeah. No, so I probably have a few stories, but one that probably sticks with me is I was walking down the main street of my town and I saw a lady sitting on the street, she was sitting on a seat near the traffic lights. And when I walked past her, I immediately knew something was not right. And I just said, something inside me said, are you okay? And she said, no, I'm not. So what happened from there was I actually sat down with her for 20 minutes and I just had a conversation with her. And she said, people have walked past me. She said, people see me as angry. They've seen all these things about her. She said, I've tried to get support from so many places and no one's listened to me and everybody's ignored me and just brushed me off. And it turns out this lady she was in a lot of pain. She had a lot of things wrong with her teeth. She was in a lot of pain, which was why she was grumpy. But the more grumpy she was, the more people were ignoring her and not really seeing her. So all I did was actually sat down with her for half an hour and I just listened. I let her say what was going on, and I heard it all. And at the end, I said, after about 20 minutes, I said, I'm so sorry that I cannot help you anymore. And as I got up, she said, you have done the best thing for me today. She said, it doesn't matter that you can't help me. The fact that you stopped, you asked if I was okay, and you listened to me has made the world of difference. And she actually left smiling. She was much calmer. She had a medical appointment that day, and she said, you know what? I'll be okay to go to that appointment now. I'll be okay to wait those couple of hours to go there. And it really reinforced just seeing someone and listening. You don't have to solve anyone's problems, but just sitting there and listening can really boost someone's mood and make a world of difference. And the smile, like she was grumpy for a start, she was smiling by the end. It's just that kindness, I guess. So
It's a beautiful story. Thanks very much for that, Sally. Roz.
Yeah, that was lovely. So, I mean, like Sally, I've got lots of different people that pop into mind, having taken laughter into some of the darkest, most socially isolated places. Necessarily, there will be so many people who's like you're wowed by their, those mini transformational moments. But none more so than one when I was doing a pilot, a laughter yoga pilot in aged care. And it was a 6-week pilot project and, with residents. And this was with a colleague of mine, a nursing colleague of mine from La Trobe University. And anyway, in week 2 of this pilot program, one of the lifestyle staff said, is it okay if Richard joins? But he hadn't done the paperwork or anything. And so he wasn't officially part of the pilot. I said, yeah, of course, the more the merrier. So they bring Richard in, and I'd say he was probably in his mid-60s only, and he was in one of these, is it Elizabethan, whatever the chairs, the ones that Victorian Elizabethan, David, you would know. He's not like a proper wheel, like a fully motorized.
Yes, yeah.
The nurse said basically he doesn't feel anything from here down, but he has got one finger and he can talk.
Wow.
Like, okay. So throughout that session, I was watching all of the residents, but specifically I was sort of keeping an eye on Richard because I just thought, he's extra, he's sort of a bit of an extra, a caution I think needed there potentially. Anyway, after the 30-minute laughter yoga session, we after we measured blood pressure and heart rate, etc., and the residents started to leave, Richard was still there waiting for someone to take him back to his room. So I went over to him and he was there and he had like a tear streaming down and I thought, oh no, like what have I, like, what's this laughter session done for him? And so I said, Richard, are you okay? I'm really sorry if something's, caused some sort of, pain or anything. He says, I cannot tell you how good I feel. He said, about 6 months ago, I had a back operation, which left me like you see me, and I have not been able to smile or laugh since. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And like, I still think of it today and I can see his face as clearly, as yours is now, David. And as a result of that, while I was in the facility and for a little bit longer over the next several weeks, I actually did one-on-one smiling meditations with him because that was something he could do, and also some laughter work with him. And I just thought, wow, like, you talk about, the lottery of life and the cards that were dealt. This poor guy, he was, like I say, in his mid-60s, he had back issues, but he was mobile to an extent, and then he wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. And you don't realise, none of us realise just how much that little, the smile, the laughter.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, he felt like he'd done something, like,
yeah, that's beautiful. I had goosebumps when you read that. So thanks, Roz. Yeah.
It's a beautiful story. I think both those stories will stay with us for the day. And, we are changed by them as well. We are changed
Absolutely.
as much as the person that expresses their gratitude to you. Look, I'm really thrilled to have both of you with me today. And the stories have been very powerful, and your lives are such. I sometimes like to think of us as people. We are like works of art. You know, we don't need to get hung on the wall, but there's so much in a person's life, and sometimes you only hear, what someone has meant to someone else in a funeral, something like that, and that's really quite sad. But look, thank you very much for your time today, and I'm sure that people will watch or listen to this and be greatly touched by both your stories. And I really wish you both well, and I want to keep in touch.
Thanks, David.
Much, David.
Great sharing it with David and Roz. Thank you.
Absolutely. Lovely meeting you, Sally.
Definitely.
Keep up the good work.
You too. You too.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Love, Laughter and Kindness. Now, before you go, here's your kindness challenge for the week. Do one small act of kindness for someone who may never expect it. A smile, a message, a helping hand, a moment of laughter. Join us again for Love, Laughter and Kindness, and subscribe, please, to keep the conversation growing. Because together we can build a kinder world.